Time our children are dismissed for Children's Church. I mentioned this morning, being in this series about camouflage, I've noticed camouflage more than I normally do, and even noticed a couple people in our church have camouflage Bible covers. I told them that kind of defeats the purpose. You want people to see you having a Bible, and if it's camouflage, nobody can see it, of course, and that kind of fights against that. But it's amazing the camouflage that is out there. You can just about get anything camouflaged today. Well, back in December, I went home to Virginia to marry my nephew Zach to his fiancée Amy, and the wedding was on a Saturday, so I had to stay over and miss a Sunday here. And that Sunday, I went to church with my mother. She's married to a preacher. He was the preacher at a church they attend, for years and years, and now he's the seniors minister. He's still on staff there. The church runs around about 400 people. And after worshiping, I got in the car with my mother and stepfather, and I said, "You have an awesome church, great people, it was a great service." But I said, "I wonder how many people have visited and not come back because they touch you so much." It was amazing. I've never been hugged and touched so much in my life. Before and after the service, there was just so much touching, and I don't know if it was because I was the former minister's stepson or my mom or what, but it was just amazing. There are 4 scriptures in the New Testament that refer to the holy kiss. Now, we do not practice the holy kiss here at First Church of Christ, and I got to say, I'm okay with that, all right? I'm okay with that. But the early church, they did participate in what is called the holy kiss, and most believe it was a simple kiss on the cheek, perhaps on both cheeks. The kiss was a sign of greeting, much like our handshake today. Well, each week I shake your hand, usually on the way in and on the way out. In doing so, I shake from 300 to 400 hands each Sunday. I also shake quite a few hands during the week. And I've done this for years and years, and because of this, I have a permanent sore spot on my hand. It's the truth. It always hurts. It's always sore. Simply from shaking so many hands. So a hug, a kiss, a handshake. Is there supposed to be some sequence to love? Well, the Bible says in 1 John 4:19, we love because God first loved us, which means we receive God's love and then we give God's love away. God gives, then we give. That's the sequence of love. I believe the answer to most of the problems in this world today is love. It's love. Heard a story this week about a preacher down south who went to an abortion clinic to give a gift to the doctor that performed abortions at the clinic. To his surprise, after sharing the fact that he had a gift for the doctor, the receptionist took him back to the doctor's office and allowed him to give it to him personally. He handed the gift to the doctor and he said, "I just wanted to give you a gift and apologize to you for the way Christians have treated you." Well, the doctor said, "You do know I perform the abortions here at the clinic." And the minister said, "Yes, I do, and I couldn't disagree more with what you do. However, I just want to share Jesus' love with you." Well, the doctor went on to tell the minister how his office, his home, and his car had been vandalized numerous times, how his family got death threats continually, even death threats for his children. And the doctor said, and yes, most of the time it's been from people who claim to be Christians. And the minister said, "Yeah, again, that's why I'm here. I just want to apologize that Christians have treated you that way." Then he asked the doctor if he could pray for him, and to his surprise, the doctor said yes. The doctor didn't close his eyes, but he allowed him to pray for the doctor. And just before leaving the doctor's office, the minister turned around and said, "You know what we're against, but do you know what we are for?" And the doctor said no. And the minister said, "We are for people. We love people because Jesus first loved us." We can camouflage ourselves. We can blend in with the world. We can act like the world. We can yell and scream and hate. We can threaten violence. We can even take part in violence. We can vandalize. We can destroy. But when we claim to know Christ and we do those things, we forget to do what Christ calls us to do first. And he calls us first to love. When we do those other things, we just put on layers and layers of camouflage. Well, the Bible tells us that we must not fight the world, fight like the world fights. In 2 Corinthians 10:3, it says, "For though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does." Now, in this series, we've been looking at the church at Corinth. The church there was blending in. They were camouflaged. They were acting like the world. They were accepting, even practicing in sexual immorality. They were arguing with one another. They were suing one another, fighting against one another. They were even fighting the people who were lost in their city, wanting to fight that persecution instead of showing love. And so Paul is addressing their sin in this letter in Corinthians. And so in 1 Corinthians 9, beginning with verse 19, we read, "Though I'm free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. To the Jews," Paul writes, "I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law, I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law, I became like one not having the law, though I am not free from God's law, but am under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. To the weak I became weak to win the weak. I've become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some. I do all this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings." So the first thing we notice here is that freedom isn't free. Freedom isn't free. Freedom always costs someone something. It cost Jesus his life to set us free. It has cost soldiers their lives to keep us free as Americans. Freedom always costs someone something. If you recall, not long ago, the Navy ship, the USS Fitzgerald, collided with another ship just a few miles off the coast of Japan. Several sailors, after the crash, were trapped below the waterline inside the ship. And this man, Gary Ream, immediately dove into the water and began to rescue the sailors that were trapped. He would save between 20 and 30 sailors before drowning himself. He lost his life, saving their lives. And if he were here today, he could make the argument that freedom isn't free. It always costs someone something. Notice verse 19 again. Paul writes, "Though I am free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible." Now, what's a slave? A slave is someone that's not free. Paul's saying here that in every relationship, we must ask, how can I love this person like Christ would? What can I give to this person? Not what can I get from this person or what can I take from this person, but what can I give to this person to lead them to Christ, to lead them closer to Christ. You know, someone who gives and knows how to give very well is a man named James Harrison. He lives in Australia. When James was 14, he went through a difficult surgery that dealt with his heart and his lungs. And because of this, he had to go through several blood transfusions. Well, he made a deal with God. He said, "God, when I'm 18 and I can give blood and plasma, if I live, I will give as much as you want me to give, as much as I can." Well, fast forward 57 years, and every 3 weeks, James has gone and donated his plasma. They call him Australia's golden arm. Come to find out, James has a rare antibody in his plasma that fights a deadly disease in Australia called Rhesus disease. And they use his plasma to make a vaccine. And because of this, this man is responsible for saving, get this, 2.4 million babies' lives. 17% of the women who get pregnant in Australia come down with this disease, and this man's plasma makes the vaccine that fights it. Every 3 weeks, this man goes in and says, "What can I give?" Not what can I get, what can I give? He understands freedom isn't free. Next, we notice responsibilities for the Christian are greater than rights. Paul's an educated man. He's a well-groomed leader. He's a Roman citizen who has had the opportunity who had the opportunity to lay down his passport or whatever they had back then and use his freedom to his advantage. However, he sets his rights, he sets that freedom on the shelf so that his responsibility through Christ to love people can be on display. Last week we noticed a man by the name of Viktor Frankl, a Jewish man who made it out of the German concentration camps. In his book, The Search for the Meaning of Life, he writes, "Freedom is only part of the story and a half-truth. That is why I recommend," he writes, "that the Statue of Liberty on the East Coast be supplemented by a Statue of Responsibility on the West Coast." And think about it. We are Christians and we're Americans, so we're doubly blessed. However, my rights as an American should never get in the way of my responsibilities as a Christian. They're not always in conflict with one another. However, at times they are, and when they are, our responsibility as a Christian is more important than our rights as an American. Which is why Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 9:22, "To the weak I became weak to win the weak. I've become all things to all people, so that by all means I might save some." This week we watched in horror as yet another school shooting was shared. A teenager entered a school in Florida and killed some 17 people. And we know because of great loss, so many in that area right now, they are weak. They just feel weak. And it's encouraging to hear how churches and Christians and others are reaching out to help: counselors, donations, food, people helping those who are weak, people becoming weak themselves so that they can help others in their weakness. And as Christians, that is what we want to do. It's what we're called to do. When someone is weak, we need to want to help them, even if it allows us to experience some sacrifice, some weakness. Our responsibilities are greater than our rights. I heard a preacher tell a story of a true court case in Alabama. A lady in Alabama had her home broken into a while back. She was 90 years old, and two men took advantage of her by breaking in and stealing from her. Somehow she was able to identify these two men, so the prosecutor brought her up on the stand during the court case to identify them. Well, because she was 90 and to prove she was of sound mind, he had worked on her with a line of questioning that he would use to prove she was of sound mind while on the stand. Well, the first question he asked was, "Do you know who I am?" And she replied, "Yes, you're Jonathan Williams. You're the prosecutor." But before he could ask the next question, she said, "I taught you in Sunday school," she said. And then she started in on him. She said, "You have been a big disappointment to me." She said, "I heard you had an affair on your wife, and I am not happy about that," she said. Well, the courtroom was buzzing, so the prosecutor tried to redirect her. He says, "Well, do you know the defense attorney?" And she said, "Yes, I know him. I taught him Sunday school as well." And she went on to say, "And he had an affair with your wife, and I'm not happy about him either," she said. Well, the judge said, "Time out." He calls these two attorneys up to the bench, and he puts his hand over the microphone, and he says, "If either of you two knuckleheads ask her if she knows me, I'm going to send you straight to the electric chair," he said. We can fight for the rights of others. We can even fight for our own rights. However, we must make sure that we are fulfilling our responsibilities first. Our responsibility as a Christian to make wise choices and to love others. Rights and responsibilities and rights. Taylor University is a Christian university in Indiana. Perhaps some of you have visited the campus. They have a large population of African students who actually get to attend the college because of generous donations. They get to attend the college free of charge. Well, one of them is a young man by the name of Sam. He had never been to the States, so when he arrived at the school for a visit, he was nervous and kind of scared. So the president of the college decided to just give him a personal tour himself. So at the end of the tour, the president asked Sam if he had noticed any dorm that he preferred to live in. He said, I'm going to give you first choice. Where do you want to live? This African student following Jesus said, if there's a room that no one wants, give me that room, he said. You know, students here today, if there's someone at school that no one talks to, sits with, hangs out with, how about talking and sitting and hanging out with that person? Your responsibility to love is greater than your right to sit with whomever you choose. Adults, if we're parking at the hospital, at the mall, at the bank, at the church, how about we take the furthest spot? Because again, our responsibility to love is greater than our right to have that front row spot. You know, I blew my horn at someone not long ago who pulled out in front of me. And when they did, it was dangerous, but I blew my horn at them. And when I did, one of my family members said, I haven't heard you blow the horn at anyone in a long, long time. Well, it convicted me. It was like, yeah, I shouldn't have blown the horn. I shouldn't have done that. So I decided right then, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to start praying for the people that pull out in front of me or pull out and drive real slow. I'm just going to start praying for them. Well, it's unbelievable how much I pray these days, first of all, all right? Just unbelievable. And, you know, and I do. I'm trying to pray for them when they pull out from me. I try to pray for them when they're going 10 mile an hour, 20 mile an hour, 55 mile an hour under the speed limit, all right? Praying for them. It's a lot easier to love instead of getting angry and hate when you're praying for someone. But you know what? Our responsibility to love is greater than our right to have a free road in front of us or have no one go slow in front of us or pull in front of us. If there's someone in this community, you know, that's hurting, in need, let's pray and reach out to that neighbor together, because our responsibility, again, to love is greater than our right to live simply a carefree life for personal gain. I mean, think about it. Isn't that what Jesus did? He had every right to stay in heaven, and yet he knew he was responsible for the salvation of mankind. So he left heaven and he gave his life on a cross. We had no right to hang him on that cross. He was perfect, never sinned, much less committed a crime. But he allowed his rights to be abused because he would not overlook his responsibility. As Christians, our responsibility is greater than our rights. This is why the brother of Jesus, a man named James, wrote these powerful words we find in James 2:14. What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save him? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm and well fed, but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if it's not accompanied by action, is dead. Not lukewarm, not okay, dead. But someone will say, you have faith, I have deeds. Show me your faith without deeds, and I will show you my faith by my deeds. So how do we take off the camouflage, stop blending in, and show our faith through our deeds? How do we put our responsibilities as Christians above our rights? Well, I believe it starts with with being aware. We've got to be aware. We must be aware of the darkness and sin around us. We must be aware and refuse to contribute to that darkness. You know, some people who claim to be Christians do not even realize they're walking around in darkness, contributing to the darkness. They feel it's their right to gossip or tear someone down or point out the faults of another. Some even claim to do it in the name of Jesus Christ. They feel it's their right to watch what they want to watch, to do what they want to do, to listen to what they want to listen to talk how they want to talk. After all, everyone's a sinner. However, that mindset, it just puts on layers and layers and layers of camouflage. It just makes us look like the world. That mindset is not of Christ. It's of the world. John 3:19, this is the judgment, that the light has come into the world, and men love darkness rather than light, for their deeds were evil. So we must be aware of the sin around us, of the sin that can easily entangle us, and choose light over darkness, responsibility over our rights. Then after becoming aware, we must make an assessment. And that assessment needs to lead us to the fact that life with Jesus is a life of true joy. And life without Jesus we simply won't find an answer. We won't find an answer in the world. Sometimes we have to go through things like divorce and addiction and bankruptcy and poor health. We have to go through and get through those things because it's what finally makes us notice that Jesus really is the answer. Jesus makes the difference. Following Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. So let me ask you this morning, what do you need to get through, get past, get over, so that Christ is first in your life, so that Christ is the answer in your life, so that you're not camouflaged, so that you're not blending in with the world? Notice these scriptures, Romans 12:2. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. And then 1 John 2, beginning with verse 15. Do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, love for the Father is not in them. For everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life comes not from the Father, but from the world. The world and its desires pass away, but whoever does the will of God lives forever. When we become aware of the sin of the world, when we become aware of the sin in our life, when we assess our lives and conclude that life with Jesus truly is the answer, well, then that will lead us to action. You know, we see that here at First Church of Christ. The people who teach our children on Sundays and Wednesdays, the people who set up the building before service, the people who lead worship, lead the choir, play the instruments, do the soundboard, the PowerPoint, and the video, the people that are involved in all the different committees that do great things here at the church, the building and grounds crew who have already come several Sundays and came this morning at like 5 in the morning just to make sure the sidewalks and parking areas were clear. They are people of action. People not blending in when it comes to deeds and their Christian responsibility because they love this church and love God. You see, most Christians stay in the area of awareness and assessment. They just stay there. And even worse, what they're aware of is everyone else's sin, and what they assess is what everyone else is doing or not doing. In fact, they rant and rave about it, and all that does is hurt the church. You know, action will not earn your way into heaven, but action is where your faith becomes personal. Action is what sets you apart. Action is demonstrating the love of Jesus, demonstrating your love for Jesus, and demonstrating the love of Jesus and demonstrating the love you have for Jesus is what keeps you from blending in. Ernie Johnson gets this. Ernie Johnson is a sports broadcaster for TNT and TBS. He has had an extremely successful career. He's a great personality. Ernie and his wife are Christians. Their faith means the world to them. And wanting to be Christians of action, they have adopted several children with special needs throughout their life together. One of them is a kid by the name of Michael. They adopted him when he was 3. Michael has muscular dystrophy. He is now 26. He cannot feed himself. He cannot bathe himself. He cannot even breathe on his own. And even though the health care for him is incredibly expensive and he's still living at home, so it takes hours and hours each week of care from them to help him as well. Even though they have all that pressed against them, Ernie Johnson had this to say about it. He said, some people are driven by going on mission trips and motivated by digging wells for kids who don't have clean drinking water. Everybody's wired different. This is one of the ways we are wired. We have this heart for adoption. It's rooted in our faith, our Christian faith. We're instructed to care for orphans and widows. We don't want credit. We don't want pats on the back. Then he said, we're getting a lot more out of this than our adopted children are. Isn't that amazing? That is faith in action. Faith that doesn't blend in. Ernie and his wife understand that responsibilities for the Christian more important than our rights. Well, the final thing we notice this morning is those who follow the crowd usually get lost in it. In our passage this morning, we find that Paul has found middle ground between Jewish people and Gentile people. Now, where did he learn that? He learned that from Jesus. Paul and Jesus did not get caught up in worldly division, did not get it caught up on sinner versus Christian, on sinner versus God's child. They didn't get caught up on that because they just simply focused on all people. Our culture today tugs at us, does it not? It pulls at us to pick sides. Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative. Pick a side. And the problem with that is when we pick sides, sometimes we lose track of an entirely different group of people that's half the people we see every day. And God doesn't want us to do that. He doesn't want us to lose track that no matter what, people are people. And they're either lost or saved. And our goal is to save them all through Jesus Christ. It's all about people. Paul puts it like this, 1 Corinthians 9, beginning with verse 24. Do you not know that in a race all runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, I do not run like someone running aimlessly. I do not fight like a boxer beating the air. No, I strike a blow to my body and make it my slave so that after I've preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified from the prize. That's Paul saying there, the Christian needs to stand out. They need to stand out. Think about it. The winner of a race stands out, do they not? You know who the winner is. You might not know who gets 100th, but you know who wins the race. They stand out. And the world needs to see the Christian as a winner through Jesus Christ. Not someone aimlessly going through life, not someone living life like the rest of the world, blending in, camouflage, but someone disciplined, someone preaching a message of love, because that's what the gospel is, a message of love, and that's what we're called to share. A message that always wins. The Bible even states, love never fails. The gospel never fails. God never fails because it's all love. It's all love. It always wins. Daryl Davis is the focus of a documentary on Netflix called Accidental Courtesy. The reason he's the focus of this documentary is because he goes and rings the doorbells of anyone who's a member of the KKK. He rings their doorbell and he tries to become friends with them, invites them to lunch, talks to them, gets to know them. I haven't seen this documentary yet, but someone at First Service had seen it, and they told me he actually let the KKK use his bus to go to a meeting. Offered him the bus. Just amazing. But what you learn in that documentary, which is fascinating, is the KKK hates him because he's black, and the Black Lives Matter movement hates him because he's friends with KKK members. So he's in the middle. He's right there in the middle. He's found middle ground. But here's the question he asks everyone on both sides. He says, how can you hate me when you don't know me? And slowly, several on both sides have gotten to know him, and guess what? They've gotten to like him. He's not following the crowd. He's not camouflaged. He's not blending in. He's making a difference. And how's he making a difference? Through love. Through love. It takes a great amount of discipline to fight fire, to not fight fire with fire, but to fight fire with love. The Bible teaches us the mission of Jesus, to love others. And that mission is more important than our academic goals, more important than our athletic goals, more important than our career, and much more important than what we have or do not have. In fact, there's nothing more important than the mission of Jesus, to seek and save the lost through the gospel message of love through Jesus Christ. So we must take off the camouflage. We must stop blending in. We must not follow the crowd. We must be people of action, showing the world God, showing the world love. Well, if you have a decision to make this morning, as the worship leaders come and we stand, I just encourage you to make that decision today. Come forward and allow God's love to lead and direct your life. Let's stand and sing.